Uh, so I was looking at Dugin's claim to radicalize the form of the Antichrist, or that is to say, I was going to say the concept, but it seemed too weak. But form somehow, I'm not sure sort of how to analyze that. Why should it be a form? Why should the Antichrist be a form? Um, but I guess he gives us some guidance there. This whole paper is it's a long paper, and it's interesting in terms of seeing how Dugin uh, philosophizes, let's call it, or let's say how he poses himself questions, which we can then attempt to sort of go along with and see how far we can share these experiences of this Dasein, let's say. If we're talking about Dasein, then in a certain way, Dasein is that feeling for the forms, basically, in the sense that an unformed world would be sort of like the form of the unformed, and then Heidegger wants to say Dasein is holding on this sort of threshold where being aware of the problem of the form of forms, so that for instance, that the sudden awareness of being is contrasted in a Sphinx-like way, but also in a way that's disturbing for the early Greeks, constantly giving their conscious problem shouled, that the nothing also is. Dasein doesn't merely speak of forms. Let me put it that way. That's just a sort of dogmatic claim, and also it stands there as though to say, is it true that Dasein doesn't speak of forms, or rather of something else? Because it doesn't speak in the terms of Hegel or Bergson. It doesn't speak in the who have tried to go back and forth between understanding the form of being as becoming, or as duration, flipping back and forth, or in the sense of the ideal realism of Aristotle, or the idealism of Plato, if you like. Instead, Dasein is this opening, and it doesn't. That's why Heidegger has problems with the Arigness. But okay, so we have here Dugin's talking about the Antichrist, saying that he's radicalizing this by going beyond, for instance, the semantic field of Antichrist in Christian usage, but also including other traditions, such as the Islamic tradition. Now, the Islamic tradition, although of course is directly the claims to be a clearer, more translucent form of Christianity, and so then it claims that correspondingly, I think they would say, if we had a good representative of Islam here, they'd say, well, one, that the Quran gives God's message in greater translucence, and more crystal clear piercing power for the believer, as they would say, is demonstrated by the fact that Americans boast all the time. I mean, the mere fact of boasting is repulsive and disgusting, as I think it, for the most part, should be. I mean, boasting is something rather buffoonish. I mean, it has. If it's Muhammad Ali and he's boasting, and then he can back it up, then maybe it's kind of, that's okay. It's entertainment. It's an athletic thing, and that we could stand a few instances of boasters, just like we could have a few instances of well, almost actually, I was going to say the sort of what corresponds to boasting, I think, is hubris. They're different, but I don't know if we would want any cases of hubris at all. It's just that boasting is more ridiculous. More, it's sort of funny in some cases, as long as it's just. Meaning it's not good, but it's not actually like hubris, actually harmful. But when boasting becomes the principle of a society, everybody's all the time trying to show they're better than everyone else, such as in music videos, in the President of the United States, and it becomes cultural. You could see why the Muslim is so repulsed, and in a certain way, rightly so, by America as it appears as the Dajjal itself. The Dajjal is supposed to be one guy. It's the guy, he's walking forward. You could recognize him. You could ask, oh, hey, you with the unprepossessing face there, visage, are you the Dajjal? And then maybe he is the Dajjal. It's supposed to be taken as someone is the Dajjal, but then of course, we brought in, with the background of John's exhibition or words on the Antichrist. I guess the Antichrist is both plural. There's Antichrist, sort of like the Elohim, but then there's also the one. There's also this one Antichrist, according to John's version. I think for him, I think it was literally Nero. So it's meant to be straightforwardly a person. So that we could try to apply that to the current time, but it's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like Dugin wants to say that Soros is the Antichrist, but let's not go into that now. And maybe that's not what he's saying exactly. Maybe that's not right. Peter Thiel did given some opinions not that long ago about Greta Thunberg almost being the Dajjal somehow. But I don't know if that was really exactly what he said. I'm probably being hyperbolic by saying that. And also figures that are supposedly bringing about something like the EU, some super national structures he doesn't like for whatever reason. I think because he thinks it gets in the way of these economic structures. He's somehow a Mont Pelerin Society, or whatever the other group is called, type of, I guess he's a Hayekian, I don't know, something in that direction. Well, let's just say market fundamentalist. That's probably the most accurate way of describing Thiel. So his reasons for being against the Antichrist and considering the Antichrist in a certain light, I feel, are not really sufficient, whereas Dugin is much more serious. So it's very interesting to start to engage with the Dugin essay for multiple reasons. And so let me finish with just that one point, is that it seems to me what his claim is that one, we could have just a semantic field, or understanding within the Christian tradition of what Antichrist is. So, which is to say that the Antichrist means something to us directly, phenomenologically, in vernacular language, but that would tell us about ourselves and not about the Christian tradition of Antichrist. And then we have to find out about that. We have to look at not just what the original source says, not just etymologize the word by saying here's where it first appeared in usage. We do have to look at that, but we also have to look at how it was used by the early Christians, how it was used by everyone that we have a record of for the existence of Christianity in a way. But Dugin saying he's radicalizing this by also bringing in these other versions, in some cases in the Islamic version, where I think there's multiple twists and turns that the Shia have sort of think that there's a counter figure called the Mahdi, who's almost like a Christ figure that will come and defeat the Antichrist or the Dajjal. But then the other sects say that the hidden Imam will come. The Sunnis say the Sunnis the great majority, and and there's other groups of those did not at all exhaust the spectrum of Islamic beliefs. The Sufis, the Turkish, Ottoman Islamists are very different than the Islamic Brotherhood. What they represent is also very different. You can't just, what I mean to say is it's not really sufficient to just say Sunni Shia as we were taught from the time of the sort of the Gulf War, I guess, or something like that, or the Iraq War, to say. But, or at least that was my experience as an American. I think that's when most Americans started hearing about these issues, is because of the two Gulf Wars. Maybe that's not right. Of course, some people already knew about this for other reasons, but I'm saying at large. So yeah, we have this notion of the radicalization through looking at other traditions that have something that could be said to, in some way, share a form. Dugin doesn't say share a form. I think he might say he gives some kind of semantic analysis in order to say how he's thinking about it, which is interesting in its own right, and then presents it as though it were sort of reading a text. And the radicalization is this combination by bringing in these different textual traditions and then trying to find a sort of efficacious look at the form rather than the causal system. Because ultimately what he's getting at, what he's claiming, which is very interesting, is that Christianity without the Antichrist and without the Antichrist starts the tendency of becoming, losing its actual significance, losing its direct significance. So that by radicalizing the figure of the Antichrist and by bringing in these different groups into the this way, or vague in Heideggerian terms, or methodos, if you like, one doesn't just attempt to change anything causally, this, and then any time in the sense of Aristotelian time, causal time. Something follows something, and then you get the human question of what is causality, something like a stone or something like hemoglobin, which casts a shadow. And then Hume forces us to say no, it's somehow it's something different, and then German idealism has to come out of that. But rather, the way Dugin's pressing at it, we don't necessarily have to look at it through that philosophic lens that came down to Hume, who's currently sort of holds sway in a way over the scientific. Scientists don't philosophize, but they have Hume, right? So they're lit with the works of David Hume, which have been so radically critical, but in a way that makes the reappraisal of all our thinking into something cogent, and probably and then I guess I'll end it this way. We could even bring the question of, does Hume's bringing our whole tradition into question through Kant's taking up of Hume and taking him seriously and developing him in a more complex way, or I shouldn't just say complex as though it were merely complex, but in a more efficacious and serious way, has forced people to take a side on that, and then to I suppose, as Strauss says, to be more radically test the roots of things. Let's leave it at that.